Good morning. And it's obviously been a long road, but I'm delighted to finally welcome you all to Dublin for this European Congress on Global Education. I believe it's only the second event of its type, 20 years after the Maastricht Declaration launched our common endeavour to build global education here in Europe. This event has been in gestation for 18 months. And it's more than a year since we in Ireland joined our friends in GE and co-chair Luxembourg in planning this conference and in drafting the declaration that we will adopt tomorrow. So I'm very pleased to welcome my friend, the Luxembourg Minister for Development, Cooperation and Humanitarian Affairs, Franz Vio, in his role as co-chair of this process and of the Congress. Now, the preparation of this event has entailed numerous, policy exchanges and consultations. I believe 10 rounds of discussion on the draft declaration. Months of feedback, obviously, from civil society right across Europe and from our friends around the world. All of these roads have led us here today to Dublin and to the next day and a half, which we will reflect on the importance of global education in all its facets and variations. Now, this actually will be the final event of Ireland's Council of European Presidency calendar, and I'm very pleased to welcome the Deputy General Secretary of the Council of Europe, Bjorn Bio. Bjorn has visited Ireland, I know, at least 3 times during the course of our 6-month term, and we are grateful to him for travelling again from Strasbourg to join us. I believe it reflects the priority he and the Council afford to education at all levels in promoting democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And we are also joined by distinguished guests from the worlds of education development, cooperation, and all strands of civil society. Particularly like, obviously, to welcome the UN Secretary General's Special Advisor for Transforming Education, who will address us this morning, and the Deputy Minister for Education from Sierra Leone, who's visiting Ireland for the first time. You are very welcome. My thanks to all my ministerial colleagues and to those senior officials who have come from right across Europe. To the representative of the United Nations, the European Commission, to the OECD, to the UNECE, and to the Portuguese language community. There are delegates, I believe, from at least 33 countries, including some who've literally travelled from the far side of the world to be with us. And thank you all very much. And of course, to acknowledge all our friends from right across the community here in Ireland. I think the fact that we have such a broad attendance at this event is actually testament to the importance of global education and to the need for a united effort to broaden the civic conversation that necessarily entails. The timing of this event and this initiative is critical as we are at a pivotal moment on the planet. As a global community, as a species, we face the climate crisis, we face the loss of biodiversity, global hunger is growing, and conflict continues to erupt. Here in Europe, Russian aggression has caused massive loss of life in Ukraine, and I believe threatens the institutional architecture across our wider continent. It really does remind us of the fragility of life, and also of the assumptions and the social and political connective tissue that underlie so many of our relationships. As societies, as governments, we're challenged constantly, I believe, by misinformation, by manipulation of media, including particularly social media, for political ends. For those of us in government, it strikes me that it has the possibility, and it's never been more important, to reflect on therefore how we must communicate in public life. More broadly, though, for those of us working in global citizenship education, it's important to take a long, hard look at how we encourage the public to reflect on and critically engage with the existential issues that we all face and the policies that frame, therefore, much of our response. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important at this point to recognise that it's been a difficult few years for all of us. The COVID pandemic took many lives. It stunted livelihoods, deprived people of opportunities. We are all very aware of the toll in our societies here in Europe and across the world. And very rarely, though, is there anything good that you can say that came out of the COVID. But one thing in all of the misery that was there that it has created, I believe, one small opportunity. My sense is, particularly here in Ireland at least, that there is a greater understanding now of the extent to which we are all individually and collectively connected. As we followed the ebb and flow of the pandemic and the way it was managed from different parts of the world, whether that be New Zealand or Brazil, whether it be China or elsewhere in Europe, we all followed the work also of the World Health Organization and the race to develop vaccines against COVID. Many of us, either personally or professionally, were involved in efforts to ensure the continuity of education, particularly for children and young children. But my point is that the pandemic was one of the few instances in which the entire world was captured and participated in a single story. And as a consequence of that, COVID perhaps helped to create more than most a tangible sense of a single global community. More than anything before it, it created that sense of that single global community. So the question therefore I pose is, how do we harness the opportunity that has arisen? How do we build on the awareness of the interconnections that exist within our societies? And for me, that means reflecting on the audience for global education and the way we reach that audience. It means embracing technological developments that accelerated during the pandemic in education and in linking people and in linking communities. It also means, though, building a new model of partnership for global education right across Europe. I would like to think that this model, I'd like to think of it as a sort of a constellation that includes citizens on the street, as well as those debating policy at the UN or the OECD. A constellation that includes educators, but also the European Union or the Council of Europe, that includes civil society and also governments and community organisations. The point of this is that in an actual constellation, you have a series of individual stars or points of light, each of it with its own identity and characteristics. But together they form something larger, something that would not be complete if any of them wasn't present. So each of us, whether we are a youth representative, a government minister, or a community volunteer, has a real part to play. Together, we can build a broad coalition that encourages all of our citizens to critically reflect on the state of the world and on how we, can make a difference at an individual and at a collective level. And as I said at the outset, we're fortunate to be joined by a wide range of experienced and insightful participants here today. Our panels will focus on quality, on broadening our audience, and on innovation. And I believe we can look forward to some very interesting debate throughout the day. Tomorrow, we'll have a dialogue between ministers and the heads of delegation and civil society representatives, during which we can reflect on the role each of us will have on delivering our joint vision for global education in Europe. Ministers and heads of delegation will have an opportunity to provide reflections from a governmental perspective. And then finally, we hopefully will adopt the Dublin Declaration. So, in conclusion, I would like obviously to thank all of you who have participated in the declaration process. I know it was an extensive and detailed, and it has, which I think, succeeded in bringing together the priorities and aspirations of different groups working in global education right across Europe. So thank you very much and welcome to Dublin.